by God's grace, didn't have to look very far. So we've asked Daniel Koster to join us. Daniel is Kristen's dad, and coming from Illinois. And so we've asked him to come, and we're going to spend some time asking him some questions, getting his perspective. And so I'm not going to do too big of an introduction because I want him to be able to share a little bit about himself. But to put a short intro in it, Daniel Koster is a farmer. He lives in Sterling, Illinois. He's also a businessman. And I think he definitely fits the definition of an entrepreneur, as you will see here in a moment. But I think in a greater description is that Daniel he's a believer. Dan is a follower of the Lord, and he engages not only in his church, but he engages in mission and leverages the gifts God's given him to help the work of the ministry in other, not only in his own community, but in other parts of the world. So we'll get to know more about that in a minute. So I want to invite now Daniel Koster. So you can join us this afternoon. So yes. This is the sit-down portion of our event this afternoon.
Good.
Our goal was to look more comfortable than you are.
So I'm Dan, and my grandson is Daniel.
That's right.
So
Clarification.
I don't get called Daniel very often, except by my mother when I'm in trouble.
I'll be honest, it felt weird coming out of my mouth saying that. Yeah, I think let's just start by getting a little bit of a background. So give us your background, how you got into, your line of work.
So the business part of it is what you're asking, David. Yeah. So I'm from northern Illinois, a town called Sterling, and I grew up on a farm. My great-grandpa immigrated from Ostfriesland, which is in northern Germany, and there, David and I were figuring this morning, I think we might be 10th or 12th generation farmers, but the name Koster is synonymous with the custodian of the church. And of course, we have cousins in Ostfriesland yet, and we have been to the church in Tettens. And by the way, that's one of the names of our company, Tettens Grain. So we're have a little background on and visit cousins, and funny thing that David and Kristen moved here. But I grew up and really enjoyed farming. So I probably knew from maybe 8 years old or 10 years old, that's what I was going to do for my life work. So I ended up going to the University of Illinois and graduated with a degree in economics. And I went to work for a company that was a bank. And I worked there in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for a couple of years before I moved back to the farm. And so moving back to the farm, and this is before I was married, meant that my dad and my uncle farmed together. And they had bought some farms in the area, and the tenant on this farm had to have a sale because he didn't go bankrupt, but his banker said, no, you need to quit, go find another occupation. So I said, I'll move back, and if I can rent that farm, and that's how I got started in 1980. So I got, so that was this, I don't know if you call that the start of my business life, because I really was in banking and learned a lot there. But I got probably intentional, because when I moved back to Sterling, being unmarried, I thought I probably needed a partner. And so the story goes that I met a friend from high school. It was a girl. She was married at a bar in Sterling that people would frequent. And we came up with 10 names of available girls in Sterling. I hadn't been in Sterling for probably 10 years, so I didn't know who was available. So to make the story short, Liz was the second one on the list. The first one I called wasn't home, and I never got past the second one. So I guess my point in partnership is part of and I think I had this in the back of my mind, to be in business on your own, business for yourself, you need to have a good partner that fills in the missing parts of what you have, and it makes it easier to be more successful. And so I happened to pick correctly. I think it was a God-given marriage. When I look back, in the rearview mirror, you see a lot of things that maybe was orchestrated by the Lord that happened. That, oh yeah, wow, that's a good thing that happened. That was better than what I thought I could do.
I would agree. So when you think back on your experience, because farming has taken you into a lot of different kind of aspects of business and business development, and we called you an entrepreneur. I mean, you could say generally farmers by definition are entrepreneurs, but I think from a business perspective, you are an entrepreneur. So maybe talk about how that journey to develop, how farming kind of got you into these other areas and starting these different businesses. And I think the question I'm asking, what are the influences that contributed you to begin your life as an entrepreneur?
Well, like I said, I think at when I was 8 years old, I was going to farm. And I think as I had jobs in high school and after college, that I really would rather work for myself, because I wanted to be the boss. And that's one of the things that I think drive entrepreneurs. They have their own ideas. They want to run the show themselves, and maybe they're a little bit obstinate, don't like to take orders. I guess I should have been in the military to kind of break that spirit, but that's really some of the driving force. And we had several in rural America. There were several things that kind of spurred some of the business by yourself, or being in business yourself. And one was called 4-H, and some of you might be familiar with that. But it's a organization of younger people that learn how to give speeches, learn the Robert's Rules of Order, and you also have a project, and you have to keep a budget, and you track your project. And my project was I raised 10 head of cattle, and kept the budget, and luckily I made money on the project, and that kind of started you thinking about finances. And when you become successful, and you the project was successful and you made a little money, that just kind of spurred you on. And the next step was in high school is FFA, and the projects were very similar, and projects got bigger. FFA is Future Farmers of America organization, and there was ag class in high school, and the same thing. You had a project, you had to keep a budget and all your finances, and part of the funds from my project put me through college. So that's kind of the spur to being in business yourself.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so talk to us a little bit, or tell a story about, because farming, I think, generalizes, or agriculture generalizes the work you're in, but how did going in and renting that farm initially from your dad and uncles, and the story of spurring on, what other ventures has that led you to develop over the years?
Well, somebody said that any opportunity that came along, I would jump on that, and I was doing a little reading in Nehemiah, and Nehemiah is for me is a good testament on planning and setting a goal and how to run a company if you really dig into it. And Rick Warren has a really good study on that. And I deviated from what your question was, David, but so opportunities. So opportunities would come along, and as I envisioned the business, I had been to the Kellogg School of Business, which is at Northwestern, and I did a case study on General Electric. General Electric at the time, back in the 90s, owned 50 or 80 companies, and none of them worked together to do business back and forth. They were all separate entities. And we were trying to figure out in our case study how General Electric could gain from doing business together as a group instead of separate entities. And so that spurred my thinking on to how do we put a farming organization together that's maybe vertically integrated with other parts that do business together. And so that's kind of how we, and this took a while. I understand that these opportunities come along, you don't have enough capital, you don't have the right partner. In a lot of the businesses we have that form or support the main business have partners. And partnerships and who you choose is really important, just like marriage is. So really, to answer your question, David, any opportunity I was ready to do if we had enough capital to do. And so with a vision, and a vision of a kind of vertically integrated, a company that works together, they do business back and forth, plus business outside of the main company also. So.
Mm-hmm. And so what was the first second company that you launched to develop this bigger vision?
So to give you some more information, so we crop farm, and we also started out with livestock, which mainly pigs. We had some cattle, and as we went forward, that was not a money-making proposition, so we concentrated on the pig business. And as we grew, then I got a partner who was my cousin, that we grew the pig business into a larger entity. And as you grow, you try to reduce some of you guys know, you reduce your cost of production and have a bigger footprint. Of course, then you add employees. And so the pig business was the first thing that expanded. And then when you have pigs, then you need to provide feed to them. And we had so many pigs that we did not raise enough corn and soybeans to feed the pigs. So we created another entity that was you may have to interpret this, a grain elevator. So how would you say that in German? Because they don't have grain elevators here, but a place that bought and stored corn from farmers, and then we sold that to our feed mill. So that's the example of kind of vertically integrated first step that the next kind of business that we added.
So we're talking about risk today and how entrepreneurship is, we do take calculated risk. Can you remember the first big decision where you knew this is the courage that you needed to take that first big risk? Can you think back on at least one of those, the first one that comes to mind?
So if you guys, Philip is about the youngest one here. Where you at, Philip? I missed you. Oh yeah, there you are, right there. I looked right at you. Sorry. So you, when you're young, you don't really consider too much risk. I mean, you can do it. And so I guess my story is a walk of faith from I can do it myself. I know I can, and you just plunge in, to later in life you realize that, I didn't probably do this all myself. So you had collaboration and some of the things, courage, and all the things you listed, those 7 things. David,
those seven out of 6 things.
That you didn't do it yourself, and God put several things in order there as you went forward. And it's also about the journey is about giving up some of figuring out that you're not in control. So I always thank the Lord that I lived this long so I could realize that I wasn't the one that did it all. He gives us free rein to, do the work and prepare and plan and stuff. And so, so they're talking about risk. Oblivious at first, more cognizant as he got older, and then passing off some of that risk to the Lord and asking, is this what I should do or not, versus starting out and just we're going to go and we're going to do it. And we did it.
And that really leads to my next question. And that is, when we talk about faith-based entrepreneurial thinking, and you said it's been a journey. As your faith has grown, it has given you a different perspective, or maybe a broader perspective on life. And so how does your faith, your walk with the Lord now inform the decisions you have to make as a owner-operator of these companies?
Yeah, so part of the journey in that part was, as you said earlier, that you figure out who owns it all. Where I just, it took me a while to figure that out. I mean, you read that, it's in your head, but then, getting to the point where, oh yeah, that's right, God does own it all. And what's going to happen when I'm gone? I can't take it with me. And how do I then use my talents to, serve Him? And that's part of the faith journey.
Yeah.
And I just had Liz and I just took a course to be able to teach Finances God's Way that we're going to do in a couple months. And there was a verse that we learned, and this is through Compass One. Howard Dayton, if anybody knows Howard, he's retired now. But it was we had to learn verses. And the verse that took me a month to memorize is that everything on heaven and earth is God's, and He owns everything. We adore how He is in control of everything. Heaven and earth are under His control, and He rules over all the earth. His hand controls power and might, and is at His discretion that He gives men strength and power. So that was one we had to learn. That's Chronicles. So that was a prayer that David gave, preparing to build the temple, preparing for Solomon to build the temple. Anyway, so that was certain verses have certain meaning to different people, and that was one that kind of convicted me.
Mm-hmm. So I have you sent me kind of a diagram on there's one slide over, and this is, if you want to just lay out, so this is all the companies that you developed over the years. I left a lot of space on the left-hand side in case you wanted to start a few more over there. Take that up with Liz afterwards if she's ready for another go. Just so for context, just so we know that over the years, these are the companies, and they all serve or each other or support each other in some way, or one does a service for another. Looking at all those things, the first question I think somebody would ask is, how do you manage all of that?
Well, I don't. I just am the overseer now. This is part of the journey, and I used to run all the different companies myself. I used to have 2 phones. I was probably on the phone, I don't know, half a day, and we had numerous employees. And finally, I got a business manager, and he immediately said, "Well, if you're gone, the operation falls apart." So this is a little bit of management, but at the time, finances were tight, and hire all those people on the org chart. That was not always easy to pay for those positions in our financial position. So I did everything, but he immediately said, well, if you're going to continue the companies, here's what you need to do. You need, $10 million of life insurance, because if you're gone, who's going to run the things? It's going to have to be liquidated. And he was right. And so we, over time, took steps. We found some really good, qualified individuals to take over leadership roles in 4 of those companies. And the way that we tried to go about that was to find, so as we were trying to lead the companies, we had a certain type of culture that we wanted. It was Christian culture, and we didn't always do this well, but this is, I was talking to Andre, and I said I should ask my guys if this is really what we do. But, faith is first, and then family, and then work. And that's the culture that we tried to establish with our employees. If they had family obligations that they could take off any day of the week, somebody would fill in. We just had to complete the job, and people had the understanding that they would help each other out. And if I may go a little further, then I also was presented, I am in a couple of peer groups of farmers that we get together twice a year, and they're from all around the United States, and they have large operations. And so we discuss a number of things which we all found that we have similar things that we deal with. And we had a speaker from a small college in Wisconsin that spoke about servant leadership. And so that put me on the path to servant leadership, and I studied it a lot, and finally decided that is really the best way to operate a company. It's a little bit, I'd say it's a next step up from the book Good to Great, if anybody's read that, on great companies and how they treat employees. But it's really stepping up to how Jesus led his disciples, as casting a vision, training the people, his disciples, giving them support, and then letting them go on their own, after he left. So I knew I wasn't going to be around forever. So that to me was a great style of management. Maggie and I were talking about different styles of management, and she was talking about her boss, and she said, well, she's not a very good boss. And I said, well, you need to just go to different, work at different places and find out different leadership styles. Leadership is, everywhere. Everybody's a leader at some point. You're a parent, or that's a really good leadership position, even though you may not be the leader at work. So I brought a couple books, and I'm going to leave them here. If somebody, this is the Servant Leadership book, and then Managing Your Money, a couple of good books. And if anybody wants more, I'll sure send them to you. I always have numerous ones around to give to different people. And so anyway, David, I deviated from your
No,
question.
that's okay. I'm a pastor. I leave a lot of room for deviation, as long as it's true. I actually have, in my mind, I have 3 questions. I don't know if anybody else wants to ask a question. We have a little time before we move to the next portion, but do you find to be the most difficult part of entrepreneurial thinking? What's the most difficult part about your businesses?
So for me, and I'm an introvert, and I'm really only a one-on-one person, so to get up here and speak to you guys is not something I do every day. But the most difficult part of my experience is leading people. And it took a while to understand that everyone has a different personality. I really, I grew up in a German style household where this was, this is what you're going to do, and probably no negotiation. And but you guys know, some of you guys know. So,
Can I get an amen?
so that was my management style. That's what I learned, and so as I, you realize some different things that all people are different, and you have to treat them differently. And it takes a lot of work to understand how to treat each person differently, or how to, you guys know, you got to be careful as you have kids. Every kid you have to handle a little bit differently on your training or your criticism or your, helping along them through life. So that was a really difficult one for me. And as the business grew, I'm not really a farmer. I'm a leader of people. Though now I'm in a position where I'm semi-retired, and I do a little farming, and that's what I really like to do. And I only have two people. One's my brother, so I can yell at him and it won't matter. And another guy is really there to help do our mission some of the mission part of what we do, and he's been there for 30 years. I have employees that have been with us for a long time, some that have retired already. My son has taken over most of the farming side of it, and then the other managers are, I mentor along and just help them on issues they have, and make sure the culture is what we like to have.
So I think that's one of the most difficult things about people is it's not just speaking truth, but we're called to speak truth in love, and that gets knowing the individual, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And really crafting your answer or your criticism or whatever. Not criticism. You shouldn't call it criticism.
It can be.
Yeah.
That can also be love.
Yeah.
I'm a parent. I would like to end by talking about how you've been able to leverage not only your knowledge and your wisdom and experience as a business person, but also your love for the church, your love for ministry. And I'd like to share a little bit about the Amazon Salt and Light ministry that you're involved in, how that got started, and what your current project is. I think this is a great example about how God can use the gifts and talents and opportunities that you give an individual to make a difference for the kingdom. So share a little bit about that.
So there's a really good book that I just read that kind of, I guess, describes Liz and our life now, and that's called The Second Half. The Second Half. Bob Buford was a successful businessman, and at 40, he lost his son, and he was trying to decide for what he was going to do the second half of his life. And he came across one of the advertisers that put the Coke commercial together, and they must have been friends, I think, if I remember in the book. And he said, "What's in your box? What's going to be in your box on your second half of your life?" So he struggled with that for a while, and he ended up putting God in the box. And I guess we're at that same point where we have more time to donate. It's not donate, to work for packing heaven, I call it. And so what we've done is every year for the past 5 years, we take a couple months off and we stay in Southern California, but I'm not sure how much longer we're going to go to California. So And we think about what we're going to do for the year, and we started out in marriage ministry, and family life was a great help in helping us do that. So that's one part of the ministry we're doing. We're just starting, besides managing money God's way, next month we start the art of marriage. And so then David was alluding to Amazon Salt and Light. So so it goes back to when I'm still in the hog business with several partners, but in the pig business, you have a feed mixture for every different size of pigs. So as you feed pigs, you have 10 different rations as they grow. And so I hired a PhD to formulate those rations. There's about 20 different ingredients in a pig ration. Pigs get fed better than people, I always said. So this young man had a PhD in nutrition, and he was an independent nutritionist. One day he was at the farm, and we were done, and I asked him if he wanted to go for an airplane ride. I had a small airplane at the farm. And he said, sure. And he got hooked on flying. And then after he got his license, then he thought he needed to be a missionary pilot. And then he went further, and to be a missionary pilot, you have to have your mechanics degree. And after he got through all that, then he decided he wanted to run a mission also. So he's pretty gregarious, and he had a young family with 4 kids, and his wife did not want to move to Brazil, but they did. And that was 12 years ago now. And he's a pilot, and then he runs Brazilian families that go out and start small groups on the interior of Brazil. And when I say the interior, these aren't indigenous people. These are just immigrants that moved to Brazil. And there's only a few roads, so most of the villages are along the river. These are tributaries of the Amazon. And so you either have to have a fast boat or an airplane to reach the different Brazilians and support them, because you send somebody off, they need support, they need, kind of to keep them going. And so the idea is to start a small group, find the leader of the village, start a small group, and eventually into a church. And he has 300 miles of the Madeira River, if anyone knows where that is, that empties into the Amazon by Manaus, when Manaus is in the northern part of Brazil. So our church, and Liz and I are on the global missions team, which we're the leaders of that. And Matt Steidinger is his name. He is a pilot also, and he was ready to move to the next river system. And planning ahead, he said in about 3 years, he'd like to do that. So and I say there's about 10 of us that are building the next airplane that he will use on the next river system. So it's in our shop. We've spent 3 years building it, and we're going to have a commissioning May 4th and send it to Brazil. The only thing is, we don't have a pilot yet. So I was trying to get Philip interested, but then he tells me his brother might be interested to be a pilot. So that's one of the things that we're doing.
That's great. Yeah. So if you ever visit the farm and they have their shop where they bring their equipment in to get worked on, the mechanic works on it, and then over on the one side you go and they have the area where they're building the plane for the Amazon Salt and Light. And so just a great example, and not just the airplane, but the way that you encouraged a man who you're just working with on the farm to pursue that, which, the thing that God laid on his heart. Matt was a believer, obviously, and had a heart for evangelism. I learned that he was actually doing prison ministry and sharing the gospel in different ways. And then it just took the Lord to use Dan to get him hooked on flying, to set him in the right direction. So that's I think a great example of the way God uses, because I mean, there's a lot of things: the collaboration, the stewardship, the risk and the courage and the faith, but it's all grounded in the Great Commission effort. And so it's always an encouragement to us. I know whenever we come visit that's something you guys enjoy talking about. The last question I have was the first point that you made at the beginning of our conversation together. So we're winding all the way back to your marriage, and talk a little bit about the things God's taught you. We were talking about collaboration in our small group. How important is it when you're married, when you're thinking about entrepreneurial thinking and collaborating with your wife? What are some things that maybe you've learned? And Ephesians said, "Submit therefore one to another," and he goes into marriage. And so, what are those things that you are thankful for? And you said it's important that you married well. What are those things that you would give in terms of things you're thankful for, or some advice you give to people who are married, or maybe are going to be married?
Well, I didn't meet you, but you had a good answer, and David had a good answer, and you had the great question for that. So, all right, now I'm thinking of several different thoughts. Now I got to process that.
All good ones.
Maybe I should have Liz answer that one.
She could. But you guys should probably know, it's not like Liz leaves the farm and then she goes and does something else. They work together. Liz is the big administrator of a lot of things going on. So yeah, I think we could have.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, I think that she ought to answer that one. That's good. There you go.
That's cool.
This might be.
Yeah. What have you learned about marriage and working together and entrepreneur and taking risks and all these things that can put strain?
And hopefully I've weighed in on things that we hadn't thought about before we made a purchase.
So I have to add that she said about 3 years into our marriage when we were farming, that when was I going to get a real job?
We didn't have a paycheck, except mine. But yeah, it's taken 44 years to really learn what God tells us how to become one. Because you just do. I don't know how that works, but when he hurts, I hurt. And I'm assuming that when I hurt, you hurt. But it's just such a gift when you can be working together, be it in ministry or business or anything. If you can attain a goal that you're both striving toward. And I think that's a real unifying factor in our marriage, don't you think?
Yes.
And we've both given up a lot. He gave up a lot as far as the children are concerned. Kristen didn't have a playpen. I had to work in the office building, and she was in one of the crates for a playpen. And so, we all gave up a lot. He missed all the ball games. He missed those kinds of things. I went to school to be a nurse. I gave that up to work for the farm. The operation became large enough that we needed a more particular bookkeeper, and I'm pretty good. And okay, so what else?
Well, the question was when we were talking about collaboration in marriage. So what are those, how do you collaborate together? What are those gifts that complement each other that has led to the ability to be able to say, okay, we've done this, now we can start doing that? What are those, how do you work together?
So one of the thoughts I had may not answer your question, David, but
that's all right.
For people, for somebody to start their own business, it's an opportunity to bring your kids along with you. And I encourage guys that have their own business that include your family in that, and they learn a lot, and then the family grows together, and it's kind of like you, David. You got all your kids here, and they're all participating, and so that's the plus side of giving up time for your, the kids play sports or whatever. You're not there, but Yeah, that's the handoff, I guess you would sacrifice, you know.
Yeah.
Well, and David, I think you can answer that because I think our life made Kristen the fine wife she is for you and that partnership. Right?
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So,
No, I agree, and I think that there's all those things that there's this old saying that says there's more caught than taught. And so that's both positive and negative. And so the things your children see you do is sometimes even more powerful than things that you tell them, because what they're doing is they're watching you live out your faith. They're watching you live out your work ethic or your vision, and they get caught up in that, or it inspires them to pursue their own vision, their own direction. And so I can definitely attest to the lifestyle that you guys have had and the hard work. It definitely has carried over. As somebody in ministry, I'm not in a business world, I'm in the ministry world, but the principles of working, the principles of entrepreneurial thinking apply, and I don't do much without getting the advice from Kristen or
whether you like it or
getting
not.
good, that's whether you like it or not, and even getting the challenge. I think that's the point, even getting the challenge so that you really are bringing your best to the table. I think that's really, really helpful. Well, before we switch over, did anyone have said, hey, you didn't answer this question, you had a question you want to ask? Judah. So for the recording, as a Christian, when is it wise to leverage debt or loans in order to gain the capital to invest in a new venture? Did I summarize that question well? I'll say I did.
Yeah. So I would say I've been struggling with that a little bit as of lately. So I like to read, and that's how I you read the greatest minds, because if you read, you can understand what they think. And numerous people that were interviewed when they were older, they said they could do more. They should have taken another risk. So in the last couple of years, I've leveraged again and invested in more farmland. And you're asking about leverage. So we're re-leveraged. I know against. So this is a whole discussion, I guess, like I said, that I've been struggling with. What is the leverage part? So you have your living expenses, and we know what the Bible says about the debt and paying the debtor or paying the interest. And is it the same for business? And I think some of those principles apply to business. Yeah, I'm not going to have a good answer for you because I'm still struggling with that.
But we don't carry personal debt.
Yes, it's only business debt that we carry. So your question was about business debt. Yeah.
Depends on the interest rate.
So, your obligation as a borrower is to pay that back. So your due diligence to be able to pay that back and or maybe leave some margin so that if something changes or fails that you still are able to is, I guess, that would be my thinking. And that's what we try to do. So I don't know whether I answered that very well because I'm.
So I think part of the question was, how does your faith inform decisions like this?
Yeah.
Prayer and research.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, it wasn't so much it was what I was going to do, and I just did it without consulting the Lord. Now it's, I got a partner. I need to consult him. I mean, why wouldn't I? And he's wiser than I am. So.
Yeah. Anyone else? So the question is, how important is it that the companies that you have work together with other Christians and people who are like-minded?
So we hired people with the right ethics and character. And what we got was Christian managers. So not that we would not hire a Christian manager. We do have a startup company that's 7 years old now, run by a young man that is a Catholic, not a practicing Catholic. Okay, so my job is mentoring him about business and faith as they go together. So not intentionally hiring Christians, but we do have a lot of Christians in the higher up management parts. And the ones that aren't, I'm mentoring to get them to that point. So, yeah.
Several years ago, there was one of the managers of their farm, was a young guy, and I could tell Dan's, I'm working on Kelly. I'm working on Kelly. So every go talk to Kelly. And so I'd go visit, I'd go talk to Kelly, and I'd bring Kelly a Bible or would challenge him. And so I would think it's always encouraging that, by law, you just can't hire people of a single religion. You can't do that. But I think the idea is, as a testimony to their vision, we want to hire people that share the same ethics and values. And a lot of times you end up with people who are also Christians. But even if they're not, there is a real culture on the farm that, hey, that person doesn't know the Lord, or they're struggling. Let's go, and they'll go and minister to that person. And so I think it's a good question, and I think it is a good answer.
We have one guy that works in the shop, and we call him the shop preacher, and he always has Christian radio on, and so he's, that's an influence that we have, when people come in and go out. The other thing was that I haven't been successful, but I wanted to hire a chaplain. And in discussion with a chaplain, and these are guys that been in, maybe been a pastor and they've retired. And in discussion with them, this is they say this is the best mission field. If we can be a chaplain to a company, you have a whole bunch of people that never will step foot into a church. But the chaplain says, that's the best mission field I can have. I can go and I can meet them, and then when they have trouble or, difficulties, the top two are marriage and finance, that they'll call me. But we, the Chaplains of America, have a number of chaplains in Chicago, but we're about 2 hours away, and so I'm still kind of working on that to find one. Yeah, yes.
I would like to ask a more controversial and also challenging question when it comes to tithing. So I would like to hear about the perspective, but also your personal experience. Is that, I've heard there are pastors say that tithing is you have to do it, and if you don't do it, you're robbing God. And I also heard people that are saying that, hey, if you don't tithe, it's okay, just contribute your time. Or there are people say that you should give a cheerful heart, and therefore don't make it a rule. I grew up in a family where my parents are entrepreneurs, but my dad was a Buddhist, my mom is a Christian, and then so my dad was making the money, but then he doesn't have that concept of tithing, right? So he will be like, okay, I'm helping people, so my mom will be using her pocket money to give it to church. It's like, okay, we don't want to rob God and we give. But I would just like to hear from your perspective. Is there anything, it's like some people will say, when you tithe, God will take you out of debt. So even if you are in debt, just give it to God. So I would just like to hear your thoughts.
So in thinking that through, and I've thought about that, a number of ways. So first, tithing comes to mind as 10%. Well, it doesn't say 10% in the Bible. And in our men's group, we got into discussion on how much is enough. Well, the answer that we came up with, well, how And I think Ron Blue was the one that came up with this. How much do you want God to bless you? But I don't believe that means that if you give it all to the church that he's going to get you out of debt. He may bless you, but that doesn't mean he may have a whole different plan in mind than what I have. So I'm trying to catch up. Is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to catch up. When we first started out, we didn't give 10%. We gave, but probably wasn't 10%. So that's why I say we're trying to catch up now, and I think it's more than, and we immediately think, this is me talking now. I immediately think money, but no, I should not think money, because a talent is also what God has blessed you with as far as your abilities. So talent is both money and things that you can do. So, tithing for me is both. And the other thing is being intentional. I heard a guy speak at the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and he was at a fundraiser, and he went over why he gave and to what organizations. And so one thing I took away from him was that we can give, but to be intentional, giving with word and deed, because you can help people out in the street corner, and we can, but it's more valuable if you have the word with it. The word, yes. So why is the hope that you believe in Christ? So, okay, I can help you, but there's more than just daily bread. It's the Word of God. So that's what we try to intentionally do to do that also, instead of so we could go serve at the soup kitchen, or we can give to a secular group that help people, but trying to be more intentional that includes God's Word.
It'll be interesting as we talk about that more. We'll get to that. We'll talk about that more. That's one of the questions we're going to have in our next section of the table, or interview table or round table we're going to have up here in a few minutes. So it's a good question, I think pertinent to thinking about entrepreneurial thinking. Lucas, okay, so the question is, how, after you build so many businesses, you grow, how do you maintain that faith-based culture and I would say the values that you establish with over time as it increases?
Yes, so that gets more difficult as you grow larger. I don't know all our employees, and so that's difficult. I don't have direct contact with them. I'm not sure, like I say, we do as good a job when we were smaller. And so my hope is that this is the way it's working, that I'm mentoring the people that are in charge of that company. So the manager and a couple of the other sub-managers, mentoring them so that passes on down through. So like I told Andre, I better go ask some of our employees. Yeah. Good. We haven't probably done as good a job as we did earlier. Yep. There, you put something on my list. Yeah.
Humble and teachable, right? That's part of it. Just always learning and always learning.
Lifelong learner. Yeah. That's good.
So we're going to take a break right now for about 10 minutes as we set up for the last portion. So if you need that last cup of coffee, some of you people are mid to late afternoon coffee drinkers, and then your bathroom breaks, and then we'll come back here and for our last portion of our time today. Okay? Yep. Thank you.